that. Might have been. I had to aim at the bottles. I had to shoot at the bottles. That's what Americans did. Is the fathers taught the kids how to shoot. And it didn't matter if you were male or female, because you never knew where the criminal or the bandit or the animal was going to come into your house. And so everybody had to learn how to shoot. Let's reinstate that. Only we can make it a national license. So everybody's licensed to carry. Whether you actually buy a gun or not, well, that's a secret. And you can do your background checks then on everybody. Duh, you want to get rid of the Muslims who are actually terrorists? This would be the way to do it. Well, you don't see any of that in his proposal, but that's mine. But at least he's pro-gun ownership and he's pro-gun carrying. In Texas here, we just passed a new law where you can carry your gun openly. I might actually go out and get one now because of that. You know, criminals aren't too likely to attack if they can see you can attack them. That's the point. That was true in the Wild West. That was true 100 years ago, 200 years ago, and that's true now. So that's a position of his that's good. Okay, but now we're on immigration reform, and this guy couldn't be dumber. His China policy will get us into World War III. His tax policy does absolutely nothing. And this is like the TVA. Do you remember that? Tennessee Valley Authority. I want to say it was Roosevelt. Not really sure it was Roosevelt and which Roosevelt. But one of them decided, oh, it must have been Franklin. We were in the middle of a depression, and Keynesian economics was, all the rage. I want to say that was when, because Keynes, I think, came out at the beginning of the 20th century. And so the idea was, well, if the government spends, it'll stimulate the economy. That's true and helpful in certain limited circumstances, but we didn't care. So Roosevelt comes up with, well, let's just build all this stuff and have the federal government pay for it. Well, really what happened was the federal government did a bunch of IOUs. That's how we started getting in debt. FDR is the first, maybe not the first, but he might have been the first president to start getting us in debt. He's the guy who created Social Security, too. Okay? So his idea was to have a federal building project. Now, I think it was the Tennessee Valley Dam or something. Anyway, that's what this guy is about. Building. This is a Democrat in disguise, because he's certainly clueless like a Democrat. Democrats are famously clueless on foreign policy. They're famously clueless on economics. Donald Trump has proven to be famously clueless on both. Okay? Or lying. Because with the tax policy, it's either he's stupid or lying. Can't say either one. Which, probably lying, if I say smart. Okay? When politicians talk about immigration reform, they mean amnesty, cheap labor, and open borders. That Schumer Rubio immigration bill was nothing more than a giveaway to the corporate patrons who run both parties. First of all, he's got his own immigrants that he employs and has been doing that for decades. You can't build a hotel without immigrant labor. And that's the point. This is the same argument that hit Rome from the very beginning. Your native people are now the patricians or now the original people, whether you call them white or higher class or you call them whatever you want. This has always been America's problem too. The immigrants coming in will be cheaper labor. If you want to get something done and make a profit, even if it's only so that you can keep on living, because you got to make a profit even to survive. When you go to work in the morning and you come home at night and you collect your paycheck at the end of the week, you better have that paycheck be bigger than the cost of what it cost you to live and to clothe yourself and to drive and to go there. Because if you don't make a profit on it, then you can't survive. What if you get sick? Who's going to pay your wages then? Who's going to pay your expenses then if you can't work? So you have to make a profit. Same thing is true for business. It's no different. Okay, well, if the people are too snotty or too high paid, and you have to go out to the highways and byways and find the immigrants, that's how America grew. It's not immigrant labor. Your first wave of immigrants come over, and there were people already here from the earlier settlers and blah, 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 and they were all full of themselves now and, rich. Not all of them rich, but a lot of them. And the immigrants were cheaper than the lower end of us, and so they got hired. That has always been true in the entire history of the United States. See, this guy has no sense of history. It's a killer. Wait a minute, I'll come back. Okay, back. It's a killer because he doesn't understand, and he's from like the quintessential melting pot city. New York City was a melting pot. How can this guy not understand that America was built on immigration labor? Everything about us is built that way. Our railroads, under Cornelius Vanderbilt, were built by a lot of, what do you want to call it, Chinese and Mexican immigrant labor, especially Chinese. A whole lot of stories about that, how badly the Chinese were treated. Okay, every wave of immigrants coming into the Statue of Liberty, because that's where they had to, check in, was Ellis Island. It was really something to go there. I had the privilege of being able to go there. And just to feel the history of the place. Okay? They mean amnesty, cheap labor, and open borders. Yeah, that is what they mean. And he's acting like, well, I don't like that. Honey, that's 200 years of America's history. How can you not like it? All right? Nothing more than a giveaway the corporate. No, it isn't. Okay? Do you know who hires immigrant labor? Small employers. The fruit packer. The guy who runs a lawn service. The restaurant owner. I'm living in Humble, Texas, which is on the southern border. I mean, right, like, maybe 60 miles from the sea. All right, it's right near Intercontinental Airport. I'm in a city of maybe, I don't know, 20,000. I'm not sure how big Humble is. It's north of Houston. I would probably say that 1/3 of the population are immigrant labor. Whether they're illegal immigrants or legal immigrants, I don't know. But I mean, and that was true when I was born in California too. I mean, Spanish and English are sort of like, two sides of a coin for me. Because you grow up and you hear it all the time. All right? So why is he, immigration, cheap labor, and open borders? Yeah, if they're immigrants, then they're going to run and be cheaper than the citizen will. That's not the fault of the immigrant. I hope you understand that. If the immigrant is willing to work at Walmart, there's a minimum wage in the United States, but let's pretend, I don't really remember what it is anymore. Let's pretend it's $7 an hour. If it were legal for Walmart to hire somebody at less than $7 an hour who's an immigrant, why shouldn't they do that? That means that Walmart's prices will be lower, so I, who am a citizen, going to Walmart buying their products, well, then my products are lower. My products' prices are lower. But if Walmart was only allowed to pay $8 an hour, let's say, and never to hire immigrants, only U.S. citizens, well, then wouldn't it have to charge higher prices to everybody? See, this is the problem. A lawnmower service, the guys that do your landscaping, chances are real good that they hire a lot of Spanish labor, a lot of Mexican labor, because a lot of Mexicans don't learn English. That's why we learned Spanish when I was growing up in California. It's down here in Texas, everybody's pretty much bilingual. Not fluent necessarily, but we can understand Spanish when we hear it, and we can reply enough that they understand us. The same thing was true in Jerusalem. They spoke 3 languages in Jerusalem. Okay, Greek and Latin, and Aramaic really. Hebrew was also spoken, but it was only when in connection with Bible. Okay? When you have a cosmopolitan place, honey, that's the way it works. Okay, so here's the problem. He's basically saying the immigrants are bad because there's amnesty, cheap labor, and open borders. And he's implying here that corporate patrons running both parties. It isn't the big corporations who benefit the most from immigrant labor, it's the small one. It's the mom and pop, the guy who's living in a ranch house that maybe costs $100,000, and instead of being somebody's employee, he's trying to run a lawn service, and so he might have 50 or 100 clients, and the only way he can have that many clients is if he hires immigrant labor, because they're willing to work for a lot lower. He can't hire a U.S. citizen to work at those rates and therefore create a business. That's why people don't do anything about immigration for 40, 50, 100, 200 years. We've had the problem that Donald Trump is talking about. It's not recent. We've had Mexicans crossing the border. We've had Canadians crossing the border. We've had everybody crossing the border since we became a country, and we were the first ones to leave our countries to come here. So Trump doesn't even understand. And of course, he couldn't have any of his hotels built without immigrant labor. It won't happen. The construction industry is at least, gotta be, 1/3 immigrant, mostly Spanish labor. Probably half, but I'm guessing. It's gotta be at least 1/3. And immigrant labor is how the economy of the southern half of the United States runs, period. I can't speak for the northern half that much, except that the Spanish population in Chicago is really high. Okay, so this guy, he doesn't understand. See, he doesn't understand taxes, he doesn't understand China, and he doesn't understand immigration and its role in keeping costs down for the rest of us. Okay, so let's go on with his stupidity, because it gets worse. Real immigration reform puts the needs of working people first, not wealthy globe-trotting donors. What? Does he have any idea what he's talking about? It isn't the big corporations who employ most of the immigrant labor. It's the little ones. Your big corporation is covered by so many regulations at the federal level, it can't really afford to employ immigrants. The closest it can do is like, with Microsoft and some of the others, is that they have to go hand in hand to Congress and ask for visas for H-1B and H-2B, which I'm against, by the way, because we already have enough people in this country who are qualified to do those jobs and actually do them better. But when it comes to, the so-called Mexican immigration, which is where he's going to focus his attention, he's dead wrong about wealthy globe-trotting donors. This is just bullshit language, okay? Because they don't employ immigrants. They don't. I mean, it's just, your canneries